The book of Genesis tells us that Abraham was childless, without hope of children, and that one night God summoned him out of his tent and said to him, "Look now towards heaven, and count the stars, if thou art able to number them." And as Abraham gazed up at the stars, he heard the voice say, "So shall thy seed be." His wife Sarah was then 76 years old, and long past the age of childbearing. So she gave him her handmaid Hagar, an Egyptian, that he might take her as his second wife. But bitterness of feeling arose between the mistress and the handmaid, and Hagar fled from the anger of Sarah, and cried out to God in her distress. And he sent to her an angel with the message, "I will multiply thy seed exceedingly, that it shall not be numbered for multitude." The angel also said to her, "Behold, thou art with child, and shalt bear a son, and shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord hath heard thy affliction." Then Hagar returned to Abraham and Sarah, and told them what the angel had said. And when the birth took place, Abraham named his son Ishmael, which means, "God shall hear." When Abraham had reached his 100th year, and Sarah was 90 years old, God spoke again to Abraham, and promised him that Sarah also should bear him a son, who must be called Isaac. Sarah gave birth to Isaac, and it was she herself who suckled him. And when he was weaned, she told Abraham that Hagar and her son must no longer remain in their household. And Abraham was deeply grieved at this, on account of his love for Ishmael. But again God spoke to him, and told him to follow the counsel of Sarah, and not to grieve. And he promised him that Ishmael should be blessed. Not one, but two great nations were to look back to Abraham as their father. Two great nations, two spiritual streams, two religions, two worlds for God. Two circles, therefore two centers. A place is never holy through the choice of man, but because it has been chosen by heaven. There were two holy centers within the orbit of Abraham. One of these was at hand, the other perhaps he did not yet know. And it was to the other that Hagar and Ishmael were guided, in a barren valley of Arabia, some 40 camel days south of Canaan. The valley was named Becca, some say on account of its narrowness. Hills surround it on all sides, except for 3 passes, one to the north, one to the south, and one opening towards the Red Sea, which is 50 miles to the west. The books do not tell us how Hagar and her son reached Becca. Perhaps some travelers took care of them, for the valley was on one of the great caravan routes, sometimes called the incense route, because perfumes and incense and such wares were brought that way from South Arabia to the Mediterranean. And no doubt Hagar was guided to leave the caravan once the place was reached. It was not long before both mother and son were overcome by thirst, to the point that Hagar feared Ishmael was dying. According to the traditions of their descendants, he cried out to God from where he lay in the sand, and his mother stood on a rock at the foot of a nearby eminence to see if any help was in sight. Seeing no one, she hastened to another point of vantage, but from there likewise not a soul was to be seen. Half distraught, she passed 7 times in all between the 2 points, until at the end of her 7th course, as she sat for rest on the further rock, the angel spoke to her. In the words of Genesis, "And God heard the voice of the lad. And the angel of God called to Hagar out of heaven, and said to her, What aileth thee, Hagar? Fear not, for God hath heard the voice of the lad where he is. Arise and lift up the lad, and hold him in thy hand, for I will make him a great nation." And God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. The water was a spring, which God caused to well up from the sand at the touch of Ishmael's heel. and thereafter the valley soon became a halt for caravans by reason of the excellence and abundance of the water. And the well was named Zamzam,